Welcome to the ArcheMedX video and podcast interview series. A reminder to our audience, if you want to catch new episodes, please subscribe to the ArcheMedX newsletter or hit the subscribe button on the YouTube link. Thank you. Our guest today is Keith Coffey, Senior Vice President, Medical and Scientific Affairs at Peachtree BioResearch Solutions. Thank you for joining us, Keith.
Kelly, thank you for having me. Pleased to be here.
Great. Can you just start by telling our audience a little bit about your background?
Sure. I am a pulmonary critical care physician, have been in the drug development space for over 20 years, working on both the sponsor side and the CRO side, and have supported a lot of therapeutic indications over that time.
Great. Well, we hope to have this conversation kind of pull out some of that experience and some of the nuggets you've learned along the way to share with our audience. So let's just start with, like, in the sea of CROs, where it can be really challenging for the CRO business model to truly align with exactly what the sponsor's model is. How does Peachtree differentiate themselves from other CROs?
Yeah, Peachtree has an interesting origin. The founders of the company were employed by a large global pharma company who was actually who merged with another pharma company, and the headquarters were moving out of Atlanta. They decided because of families and being fairly established in Atlanta, they weren't as interested in moving. So they approached the UCB leadership and suggested that they form a CRO to finish out some of the 26 or so ongoing studies that the company had. They found that being a part of a large pharma company, experiencing some of the issues with CROs, so that led them to wonder, what are smaller companies experiencing that don't have that 26 study leverage with the CROs? So they formed their own new CRO, Peachtree BioResearch Solutions, to address some of these issues. They only hire experienced personnel. So our project managers, our CRAs have at least 10 years of experience, which we believe provides the resources and the solutions, part of our name, to the problems that every study can encounter. So they really want to provide a different approach to the CRO service, and provide those solutions that pharma companies, small companies, biotech, device companies are looking for.
Yeah, I mean, attracting and retaining talent that's really experienced can certainly be, a tough task sometimes. So that says a lot about Peachtree's culture, I'm assuming, if you're able to attract and retain those folks.
Yeah, so I think, I don't know what the industry average of turnover is right now, but ours is about 2%. So I think.
Yeah, it's north of, I think, 16%, the last statistic I saw. So that's a pretty big.
It varies from year to year, depending on how some of these big pharma companies are staffing their operations.
Sure, absolutely. Well, in preparing for the interview, I was really able to gather that you and Peachtree have had some experience with virtual SIVs. So, for our listeners who maybe aren't as familiar with virtual SIVs, can you take some time to explain what they are, who's involved, and why they're necessary?
Of course. Well, the site initiation visit is a very important visit in the timeline of a clinical trial. So sites have gone through a pre-study site visit, a PSV or PSSV, just to make sure they have the facilities and the qualified staff to participate in a study. So they've then gone through IRB selection. There's been a clinical trial agreement negotiated, but at the site initiation visit, really the study begins for the site. The protocol is reviewed. Roles and responsibilities of the site staff are reviewed, regulatory documents are reviewed, the CRF is looked at. So it's really an important part of that, of this IV study. And typically, either before or after the investigator meeting, the site initiation visit really marks the point in which the site can go ahead and start screening and recruiting for the study. It also provides an opportunity for typically the CRAs managing that study site initiation visit. It gives them a chance to start building that relationship with the site personnel.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you. So as you've kind of explored, I'm sure in your career, it started at a time where there was no such thing as a virtual SIV, because mine certainly did. But as we move now, and you've had the experience in both, what are the risks and rewards of virtual SIVs?
Yeah, well, COVID happened to everybody, and
True.
so, I think in general the drug development um, sphere, the has not faced or not embraced innovation in ways that other industries have. I think the drug development world was typically behind that innovation curve. COVID forced us in all levels of development to really maybe re-examine how we do things. So when sites started letting us know that, hey, you're not welcome at our site right now because we're locked down, we had to think quickly and on our feet. And again, figure out those solutions because studies didn't stop. They may have slowed down a little bit, but a lot of studies didn't stop. There were still studies coming online, still a need for site initiation visits to get studies going. So we had to think creatively about how can we do that. And fortunately, our standard operating procedure allowed some flexibility in how we conduct site initiation visits. So we were able to pivot very quickly to a model where we set up a call, an online call like we're doing right now, to conduct that site initiation visit. And so that did meet the requirements of that site initiation visit. We were able to train the sites and do all of the things remotely that we would have done in person. So you achieve the same end goal. I think, it's not as good as being in person, but it's a very close second. I mean, the CRAs involved with that visit still have a chance to meet all of the site personnel. They still have a chance with an iPhone walking around the clinic, doing a FaceTime call to see the clinic, to see the pharmacy, to look at the drug storage area. So there's nothing that really you can't do remotely that you can do physically on site. And I know that ArcheMedX has a really nice platform, a tool to cover that site initiation visit. All of the elements that are required in person, ArcheMedX can provide remotely. So it's a very nice platform in which to do that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Absolutely. I mean, we certainly see the benefit. It's one of the tiniest silver linings of the pandemic is that little shove towards adopting some of these technologies that have existed, but maybe some of our operations leaders have been a little hesitant to lean into them, as you mentioned. And so, yeah, we're seeing that it really does solve some of the clinical training delivery obstacles that our customers face and helps them move sort of into this virtual space. So yeah, that's great. So we often have a good number of operational leaders, listening. So, with this, you mentioned SOPs, but can you talk a little bit about how you designed, procedures and if necessary, policies for overcoming any of the current obstacles with having virtual site initiation visits?
Yeah, we have actually rescued several small studies from larger CROs whose SOPs did not allow for a virtual SIV or a remote SIV. So, I think it just requires you looking at those SOPs and either revising them to allow some flexibility in there, or making sure when you're writing SOPs that you do allow some flexibility from the beginning, so you're not caught in a situation where you're stuck. You can't move forward and you can't move back. So that's what we try to avoid. So I think it's really thinking ahead, not just a week or two, or a month or two, but a year or two. And you can't really. It's difficult to envision every single new bump that may come along that road. But when you plan for it, those bumps become less severe, less time consuming, less of an importance. I mean, you just figure around an effective workaround to keep moving down the road.
Yeah, it's also a really good example. We all know, I think if you spent time in this industry, it can be very hectic and busy and fast paced. But carving out that time for some strategic thinking, especially as our careers go on, right? To look out a little farther ahead and try to anticipate and ask yourself those questions around what if does give you that flexibility in your process. And then you're not, reacting or stuck, like you say. So I'm glad you're able to help out with some of those smaller, studies where they got stuck. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a lot easier, I think, to be proactive than it is to be retroactive. And that's
Yes.
what we always try to do, is to be proactive and identify problems or issues well in advance so we have time to develop a solution.
Yeah. And or prevent them, right? Like that's even better.
Well, yeah, even better, even better.
Then we don't have to deal with them, which has always been my preference. So
Yeah.
obviously, hopefully, based on this and other information out there in the industry, many more people who've yet to try virtual site initiation visits will. So, can you just leave them with a little bit of advice based on your experience?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Plan ahead. If this is something new to a project team or to a whole company, then you know, plan it, train for it, go through some dry runs, because if someone's used to doing site initiation visits, it's not very difficult to conduct one remotely or online, but it's just different. So
Mhm.
plan for it, train for it, and involve more than one person initially, so everybody sort of gets a sense of what it's like and how to conduct that. Um, yeah, I mean, if a company is so inflexible that they can't start to embrace some of these innovative solutions to the problems that we're having, then you're going to have a very difficult time. So just think creatively. Of course, all the regulations have to be followed, and those
Sure.
check boxes have to be checked. But there's often more than one way to do that.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. Breaking down the problem and being creative about it is honestly what brings joy to a lot of the teams, right? And keeps them motivated about their work. So
Yeah, it keeps them excited. Yeah.
it circles back to why there might be 2% turnover at your group, right? If that's the kind of thinking that you're engaging in. So, all right. Well, so
Right.
thank you for your time so far. So let's transition a little bit and dig back into clinical trial innovation, right? So
Yes.
we've established, I've been in this space a little over 20 years now, and innovation has always been in the vernacular, right? Everybody always talks about it. It's been a word, it's been there. But I think along with this, though, is pretty much a broadly held belief that the industry as a whole can be pretty slow to adopt new innovations. So, we'll put the hard question to you. From the discovery phase to bringing a product to market, speed is key. It's one of the things. Of course, we have to balance that without sacrificing safety or quality. But, from your perspective, what are some ways that clinical trial teams can reduce delays and stay on time?
Yeah, so I think one way is to break it down step by step by step, and identify those steps that have a fixed time allotted to them. IRBs, for example, if you're working with a local IRB, there's sometimes not much you can do to encourage them to hurry up. So you're at you're hostage to their schedule.
Mhm.
So that's one that maybe you don't have as much opportunity to change. But there may be some other ones. Site identification. How do you have a systematic approach to identify sites that may be appropriate for your study? How can you make that process of document collection initially, site interviews? How can you really make that go more smoothly and faster? Enrollment is always, I mean, a study never finishes until enrollment is complete. So what strategies can you have before the first patient is even enrolled to actually address enrollment? Is that through an enrollment aid? There are companies that really say, hey, we can enroll your study and save you 20% on 20% of your time. So is it an enrollment? Is it advertising? Is it just finding sites, like-minded sites that may have that population? We do a lot of rare disease too, so enrollment is really key in those situations. So we try to encourage our sites to, even before that site initiation visit, to go through their database, pre-screen, and find 1 or 2 or 3 patients that they see that are likely to qualify for the study. So we really encourage that. So, it's just thinking again, think ahead. What are, in remote monitoring, that's something else that has sort of changed. We've done a lot of remote monitoring lately.
Mhm.
over the past 18 months. We've had personal data uploaded into the database, which has caused some, other issues. I'm the data protection officer in the company. So how do we work through that? How do we ensure that, again, data privacy is maintained? At the same time, sites can upload their source documents and we can get that monitoring done. So, it has posed a lot of challenges. Hybrid trials. So, there's a lot about decentralized studies, right? And some studies have achieved that successfully and some studies haven't. I'm seeing sort of a hybrid approach work very well, especially in sort of that rare disease space where patients sometimes have to travel a long ways to get to the clinic. So if you have 8 or 10 clinic visits, can we switch a few of those to a home health visit? Have a home health nurse come in. They are often able to collect blood, so your laboratory data points continue to be met. But it's easier on those subjects. It's easier on the parents if it's a pediatric rare disease study. So, there are a lot of things I think we can do. And sometimes you just have to try them and fine tune the approach to see if they're going to work and how well are they going to work and how can you make it better.
Yeah, I like that idea, certainly of iterating and trying. You can't work through those pieces unless we sort of move into it. And I really am excited to see what comes next as we move into some of these additional home health visits, because you can envision the continued innovation around the devices necessary to do some of these assessments mobily and at home, whether that's coming up with new and better ways to freeze samples, because I know there's certain studies where we'd love to do some home visits, but we can take samples, but we can't necessarily transport them properly because a lot of that technology hasn't shrunk down yet to travel. So I think there'll be some neat innovations coming out of that push.
Absolutely. I think we're going to see more and more. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. So, are there any solutions that your teams have tried, either tools or ways of managing resources, or just sort of bigger changes that you could share with our audience that have worked in helping fight delays or obstacles in running these trials?
Yeah, I think it takes really a team approach. So every member of our project teams is encouraged to share what they know. All right. So if they have seen a similar study or a similar sort of issue before, then what worked in that specific situation? And sometimes you may have a new problem that you really haven't seen before, but it really is coming together, putting our heads together. There are probably a number of specific examples, but I think that idea, that tenet holds. Just, think about it ahead of time. When it comes up, put your heads together, figure out a solution. If that's a data management question, then involve every department that this touches and get their input, and together, then you're going to find out a very good way to address this problem or issue and move forward.
Yeah, a lot of the things you've said have sort of touched on, like, in my mind, relationship, right? Like this idea of really talking to the site and getting them to do some things ahead of SIV, or getting your teams to share, or getting your teams to even recognize maybe that they need input from across different groups that maybe they might might not have initially sort of thought of. So as part of the leadership, like, how do you develop that so that they know how to share those potentially new ideas with customers and sponsors, right? Because sometimes it can be hard for the CRO team to get the sponsor on board, even though they probably should be, right? Can you speak to that at all?
You know what? We do what we can.
Right.
I think one of the reasons that people enjoy working with Peachtree is that they get used to that type of input and feedback. There are times when we have told sponsors, like, look, your timelines and your site numbers, really there's a disconnect somewhere in there. We think if you really want to get this study enrolled in 9 months, you're going to need 15 extra sites. And sometimes they say, no, that's not going to happen. And then 9 months later, we're reaching out and finding new sites. So
right.
That's just one example. But I think it depends if we can build a good relationship with the sponsor and their study team, and we bring valid and good ideas to the table, then it's a win-win. then we do all operate as one study team, and they listen to our input.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. And I've certainly had that experience, and it often helps to lay out the potential consequences, right? The choices, it's all choices, and each of them have sort of an outcome. But in circling back to innovation, for other leaders who are sitting in your seat in other organizations, what are your thoughts on how they should approach innovation to expand virtual solutions?
Well, I think, artificial intelligence is a word that is AI is thrown around all the time in all kinds of situations. But really, I think there is, I know some companies are working on an artificial intelligence approach to clinical trials, and I don't really know what that's going to eventually look like.
Right.
There are a lot of ideas. A lot of companies will, put some really flashy promos together. And it makes you interested. So I think that artificial intelligence down the road may be a tool that's employed at varying levels of clinical development. But that's a lot of work too. I mean, you got to teach those, that intelligence, what you want it to learn and analyze. So, and that's not an overnight job either.
No, definitely not. Yeah.
So I think that's one thing. Wearables have been on the scene for a while. I think there's probably a role for wearables, more wearables in the future. I think they're going to get smarter. We were trying to find a wearable that was Bluetooth enabled the other day for, I think, a hypertension study. And right now we couldn't really find one that would measure the blood pressure and then send those data automatically into the database. There are devices that do that.
Sure.
But they're just going to get smarter. We're going to get smarter. Devices are going to get smarter. Computers are going to get smarter. But it still takes people to do it. It still takes patients to enroll in a study. It will, for the foreseeable future, take a physician to agree to do the study, to help manage it and treat those patients. It still takes project managers to manage the team, still takes CRAs to get out there and monitor data. So it depends on the study as well. Some studies are more amenable to sort of a more hands-off approach. Some studies are completely not amenable to that. So it depends on the study too.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, you have to try, because I think in trying, you generate the questions and technology gaps that we can then iterate and address the next time. And if we don't try, I think what we still need in order to be successful remains unknown. And so, I like that idea. Just, you got to dig in and try. And even if you can't get it perfectly the way you want it, we'd be making some steps forward. And I often talk to people, obviously we are a big data piece of our company is around using our data to generate insights and to drive decision making. And, people get nervous when you talk about machine learning or AI. And I say it's just the same as way back in the day when we thought about, like, well, if you pull that report every month, then let's automate it, right? It's just like the next steps. It's just automating and using your data smartly and letting your data do some of the heavy exercises for you. So I think, you're right. We're headed in that.
Yeah. Even though that was, a change, that was a no-brainer. Let's make it simple.
Right. Yeah.
Just build that in.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you, Keith. What is the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you or to learn more about Peachtree?
Thank you, Kelly. I really enjoyed the time together today. You can reach me either through the Peachtree BioResearch Solutions website, or you can email me directly at keith.coffee@peachtreebrs.com.
Great. Thank you so much. If you like this episode, please subscribe to the ArcheMedX newsletter or hit the subscribe button on the YouTube channel so you'll be notified about future episodes. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Conversations in Clinical Trial Readiness. If you're interested in learning more about our team, head to our website, ArcheMedX.com, or follow us on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us.